feel like a lot of times when fights are announced and there's no big build-up, it's grappler versus grappler. There's not two strikers who are very entertaining, like a Dustin Poirier versus a Justin Gaethje, or there's not an insane build-up like a Conor McGregor versus Khabib. There's not a ton of hype behind the fights. But today when we're talking about UFC fights that over-delivered, that ended up being way better than expected, and the first example I have, Merab versus Umar. This is a very recent example, a phenomenal fight between two grapplers. And for this fight, what made it so great is, one, the build-up. It already had a pretty heated build-up, and the build-up only lasted about 3 months. I think they started beefing in September after Merab seemingly would not fight Umar, and then they ended up fighting in January, and the actual fight was insane. The fight had pretty much everything. We thought that, it may be a boring grappling match. The expectations, again, weren't too high, even though the build-up was great. And it was a back and forth fight. There was a ton on the line. The first round, Umar is kind of, outstriking him a little bit, and he's able to rock Merab at the end of the first. He wins the second, but Merab is staying in there. The second round is pretty competitive, and then the third round is when everything changes, the tide changes, and it was very close the third round, but Merab seemingly, it looked like, was able to edge it out. I did pick Umar in this fight. I picked him by 48-47 decision. I was wrong, but I was very close. I thought that he was going to edge out the third and win the first three. Unfortunately for him, Merab was able to take the third, fourth, and fifth. But what made this so great is you could see at the end of the third, Umar start to gas out. The fans in LA were going crazy. And in the fourth round, Merab really takes over. And seemingly it looked like it was over. Merab was going to dominate the fifth, which many people think he dominated the fifth round. But if you rewatch it, Umar is winning the fifth up until the last minute and a half or so. And it looks like, Umar, they're Nurmagomedovs, they're going to come back, they're going to win like they always do. And then Merab rocks him in the last minute and then takes him down, showboats. The crowd goes absolutely insane. It was the fight of the night. I do think Jamal Hill-Yeri was up there with fight of the night. That was a phenomenal overall card. And for this fight, I don't think anyone expected this to be the fight of the night over Jamal Hill and Yuri Prochazka and so many other good fights on that card. It definitely exceeded expectations, especially for me. And it was a competitive back and forth fight. And I'd like to see the rematch. It was insane to see Khabib screaming at Umar, and for the first time, that group loses, which they usually never lose. And, I like Umar. I think he's entertaining. I think he's very good. But it kind of was nice to see Merab kind of humbling him a bit. A lot of people like Merab, so it was great to see the fans were chanting his name. But yeah, this is a very recent and great example. Moving on, we have Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. Now, for this fight, many people thought it was going to be Dustin's retirement fight. And I had a fear where I thought Dustin was going to get subbed within the first round or two. I thought that he had no shot in this fight, and he did end up losing. But my fear was that this was going to be a nothing fight. Islam gets him out of there in the first round or two. Oliveira and Khabib, they don't have the same striking as Islam. You could say Oliveira is a little bit more dangerous. Khabib has a little bit of a better chin. But in terms of technical striking, they are not on the level of Islam Makhachev. And we knew that he could stand in the pocket with Dustin, but I just figured that he would get him out of there before he even needed to. And the first round kind of goes like that. The first round, he takes him down with ease. It's a very dominant round, but Dustin survives. And then the second round, I think Islam definitely won the second, but when you watched it live, because Dustin did so much better than expected, I really thought it could have went to him. Third round, Islam wins it. But again, Dustin is still hanging in there. He has good cardio. He's not gassing out. Islam, we knew he had staph infection. We knew Dustin has great cardio. So it was a little bit worrisome if you were rooting for Islam. And then the fourth round, Dustin goes out, wins the round at the end, bloodies up Islam. I think Islam got cut with an elbow or something like that. And then Dustin is yelling at him at the end of the fourth. They both were swinging in the pocket. And then in the fifth round, it looked like it could be 2-2, and Dustin is legit one round away from winning the title. And he's able to stuff the takedowns early, but then Makhachev is able to rock him a little bit. He lands a really nice, I think, left hand on him, straight to the chin. Dustin eats it. And again, it's back and forth in the fifth round. And then Islam Makhachev is able to pull off, just when you thought there would be no finishes, Dustin is going to survive. Even if he loses, he's going to go to the scorecards in a close decision, maybe a split decision. Makhachev is able to pull off one of the best grappling exchanges and one of the best submissions of the year, gets the finish, chokes out Dustin Poirier. His whole team jumps on him. It was an insane moment. And for Dustin, yes, he lost, but it was a good ending. You know, it wasn't a bad loss. It was like when Volkanovski lost to Makhachev the first time, which, speaking of, is my next example. Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, the first fight that over-delivered. Definitely not the second fight, but just like in the first fight with Dustin Poirier, everyone thought that Volkanovski, he was going to get destroyed. I think Makhachev was like a minus 400 favorite, and it wasn't because Volkanovski was bad or he was kind of being overlooked, which he kind of was. But in all fairness, Makhachev just came off of the Charles Oliveira performance where he dominated Oliveira, where he finished him within the first 2 rounds, clearly outstruck him, dropped him, and tapped him out. So for this fight, we were thinking, well, yes, Volkanovski, he's very tough, he never taps. But if you're getting yourself in the position against Brian Ortega, who's very good on the ground, Islam Makhachev, he's a little bit more dangerous, I feel like, and more likely to submit Volkanovski than Ortega. He's more likely to get him on the ground than Brian Ortega at the very least. So I was thinking he was either going to submit him or knock him out. He was the way bigger fighter coming off of the Oliveira performance. And Volkanovski is able to make it super competitive. They both rocked each other, and he ends the fight on top, landing ground and pound, almost gets him out of there. And I don't think anyone expected that. I do think Makhachev won, but still, I don't think anyone was really expecting Volkanovski to put on that level of performance. It was the most technical fight of all time, and I think it was the highest skilled fight ever in MMA in the UFC. But yeah, this was another fight that exceeded expectations. Moving on, we have Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat Chimaev. Now, for this fight, yes, Khamzat was a massive favorite. Again, I think it was like minus 500 or something. There was a crazy buildup. Everyone was excited for this fight. He was like sitting on the cage with Darren Till during Burns' walkout. And I expected Burns to get finished. I knew that he had great jiu-jitsu, so I was thinking maybe he doesn't get submitted. But he's chinny, and Khamzat just knocked out, I think, Gerald Mearshart at 185, out cold in like the first 20 seconds or something like that. And Burns, he gets dropped a lot with jabs. He got knocked out by Usman. It just was one of those where I just figured Khamzat was going to dust him in the first round, and it was a back and forth fight. Khamzat did drop him in the first, won the first round, but in the second round is really where things started to change and the expectations were way met. When Burns was able to win the second, drop Khamzat Chimaev to end it off, it was a slugfest. And then in the third round, both of them are tired, they're gassed, but they're still throwing. Khamzat was able to edge it out 29-28. But again, I don't think anyone expected this to be like a split decision, super close, back and forth brawl. I know Burns is very entertaining, so is Khamzat, but more in the grappling, not so much in the striking, where I don't think anyone was expecting this type of fight, where maybe it was competitive in the grappling, but no one thought that it just would be 2 guys swinging for the fences for 15 minutes. This was one of my favorite fights of all time. Khamzat did win the fight. Burns did not win the fight, in my opinion. Moving on to the next one, Movsar Evloev versus Diego Lopes on short notice. Movsar was a massive favorite. I feel like he was like minus 800 or something like that. No one thought that Diego Lopes was really going to stand a chance. Movsar doesn't have a ton of finishes, but a lot of people thought, well, if Movsar was ever going to get a finish, it was going to be in this fight. This is kind of a layup. No one was really excited for this fight, to be honest. We all kind of expected a snooze fest, Movsar 30-27, just holding him, which did kind of happen for moments. No one was expecting Diego Lopes to go out there, swing for the fences, and nearly finish him 2 to 3 times in the fight with 2 pretty much locked in submissions to end, I think, the first and the third round. And what we got from this fight is Diego Lopes, who was kind of like an unknown guy. No one knew him, UFC debut. And he went out there and no one knew we were getting a staple in the division. I don't know if he's going to be champion. He lost versus Volkanovski pretty convincingly. But We definitely know he is a top 3 fighter in the division. And with this fight, no one was expecting that. I think that this fight definitely deserves a rematch. I think Movsar, at the very least, if he doesn't get the title fight, which he should get the Lopes fight. But yeah, moving on to the next fight, and I believe the last fight that exceeded expectations, Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington, the first fight. Yes, there was a crazy buildup. Yes, there was a ton of hype. Both guys really did not like each other, but they both were seen as two wrestlers who didn't really have any finishing ability. I know people say Usman, well, he finished Burns, he finished Masvidal, but that was before this fight. Or that both of those were after this fight, so he didn't really have the finishing ability, at least people didn't know about when this fight was going on, and we kind of were expecting just to see who was the better wrestler, not really a striking match, and they went out there and had a 5-round war, and what made it so great is the back and forth. I think Colby started off really good, and then Usman was able to kind of turn it around, start winning. He breaks Colby's jaw, and then Colby is able, with a broken jaw, to rally back and start beating Usman. And then it gets to the 5th round, and you think, okay, no one's getting finished, but this is a great fight. And then Usman rallies back, dominates Colby, knocks him down twice, and is able to get the TKO finish over Colby Covington, which, by the way, I know people hate on that stoppage. I do not think that that was a bad stoppage. I don't think it was a good stoppage, but it wasn't the worst. Colby was just covering up like that for like 5-6 seconds in a row. And when you get knocked down twice, yes, I get that there's a minute left in a 5-round title fight. I would have let it go on for, another 5 seconds, another few seconds. But it wasn't the worst stoppage of all time. It was a phenomenal fight, and it definitely exceeded expectations, even though they were already kind of high for this fight. Still, it was a phenomenal fight, and these are just a few examples. There's a lot more of fights that over-delivered. I may make a part 2 on this, but yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know which fights you think exceeded expectations that I did not include. But yeah, that is it for me, and yeah.